So, hi Martin, nice to have you here. Uh, this is my first podcast, and I'm honored to have you here to discuss. And as you mentioned, we are not going to have this kind of title of guest and speaker. I would like to give you some context for this discussion. That recently there has been a trend going on a LinkedIn that Amazon has just moved their Prime Video architecture from distributed microservice to the monolith. And I see people are going crazy. Everyone is saying, oh, microservices are bad. We should not use it. Or apparently, this is getting a new trend now. Everyone is questioning. And that's where I would like to understand your thoughts and your opinion. How how should we read this sign from Amazon? And what does it mean for the other architects, cloud architects, senior developers, and leads? And on that context, I would like to have this discussion. And before doing that, can you just quickly introduce yourself for our audience?
Sure. Hello. So thank you for having me. Yes, that blog post is all the rage and everyone seems to be up in arms. I'm not sure we we can really make any good choice from that for us. But a little bit about me. So I'm currently at a big pharmaceutical company. I'm an architect there. We and in my group we're responsible to try at least and converge the whole organization into a common technology scheme. I'm sorry. So that's where I am now. Where I came from is pretty much all over the place. I've been doing startups. I've been doing gaming, payments, all kinds of things. And that somehow has led me now into pharmaceuticals, and that's where I ended up. And looking
Amazing,
forward to be talking about the blog post.
amazing, great. So let's jump right to it. Let me switch to the blog post that we're talking about, and we can go to. I hope you can see my screen with that article.
Yeah, it's all good. It's coming up.
Okay, cool. So I will just, I don't want to go into whole detail of how they did it. What I want to understand here is like Amazon team, they had to create a distributed application for streaming videos. They came up with architecture, which is shown here. And at some point, they figured it out. This is not working for them. And they had to do some kind of complete re-architecting their design into a monolithic solution, which is designed here. Okay. When you hear this news, when you read this article, as an architect, what is your first impression? What do you feel like? What they did, why they did, what was the trigger point for them? Can you please share
So,
that?
sure. Um, the article itself, without any of the feedback that came to me, is yeah, someone just improved whatever they had. I
Mhm.
don't think it's really that special to say, oh, we were this microservices thing and now we are completely the monolith. I don't consider that to be so highly special. The article itself to me is something where we hear from one team in a large organization that said, hey, this is how we started out, and they explain a little bit of what they did. If I understand the article correctly, it's even just a small part of Prime Video. It's just a piece of that whole thing.
Yeah.
They refactor that to something that, with what they know now, is a better choice, and that's
Mhm.
it. And they just wrote it down for all of us to see. Okay, hey, those are choices they took. a little bit of reasoning why they took it, and maybe someone can benefit from that, and we're sharing why we did it. I, that is how I read this article, and
one
that's
of the
all.
reason One of the reason this article is making buzz in the social media is because they are claiming they saved 90% of their cost by this refactoring. Yeah, I mean, I can highlight this part. So their infra cost went down over 90%. And this brings lots of discussion like, does that mean microservices are costly? Should everyone look at their solution and think, what should they do?
I
How
mean,
do you pursue this one? Like,
I think that that's a clickbait title. I mean, it's also right in the title: scaling up Prime Video and
mhm,
reducing cost by 90%.
mhm,
I hope I'm wrong, but I just don't believe that from, let's say, Monday, where they had the old service, to Tuesday, where they had the new thing, all of a sudden they run all of Prime Video with 90% less cost. I'm sorry. I think that is true for the service that they describe here,
mhm.
but it's not true for all of Prime Video.
Understood.
That is why it's clickbait. I really think the 90% cost saving, that is for this service part. I totally believe it that it is for this service part. I have no idea how much that impacts all of Prime Video, or maybe it is all of Prime Video. Congratulations. Hats off to them. Really great work.
Mhm.
But I just don't know, right? It's a title to catch a lot of clicks, to catch a lot of views. Of course, that everyone makes it maybe a little more interesting than it is. And
And
if we
you know,
look at like, if you go to the very top and read just the title and the subtitle, it's like, hey, we just saved 90% of cost. I don't know, it costs
right?
100,000 every month, and now it costs
And
10,000 every month.
that's the point,
Cool.
as you rightly mentioned. Yeah.
Yeah, but read the subtitle. Hey, we moved from microservices to monolith. Did they move everything? They moved one component, I guess.
Hmm.
One thing. The I think what they're describing is their monitoring service of quality within Prime. Now,
Yeah. I mean,
I am a Prime customer. I don't know about you. I am a Prime customer. I use Prime Video. I watch it there. But usually I watch the video. And when I sit in front of my TV, I honestly couldn't care less about how they measure their quality.
of course, it has to be transparent. Like
Yeah,
it's
so that is, I think, some component in there that no question is very important, because if it wouldn't work, I wouldn't watch Prime at all. But it is a subcomponent. It is not the whole of Prime Video. They
mm.
didn't refactor, re-architect all of Prime Video to do that.
Even though if they touch base on couple of services, like they had this kind of step function workflow with couple of services, lambda functions and whatnot, they did highlight that they saved money. And that brings us to the next question. In the industry, whether it is a startup, it's a mid-scale or a big companies, there are many projects and products. They have monolith services and microservices. This topic brings next question. Like many people, they always think monolith is bad. So when they see a code base, they see it's a monolith, they see it's outdated, this is not a good design, just kill it. Other way around as well, sometimes you see microservices which is not well designed, and again, I wouldn't go into that part, what is a well-designed microservice, but if it is too scattered, too scared, and that means there is too much work to be done. So they want to go back from microservice to monolith. And this article itself is pushing into that one. Like people are getting sick, like supporting document, like, you know why this microservice approach is bad? Because look, Amazon did this and they save 90%. So my
Yes.
question to you is, how other architects, software developers, solution architects, they should pursue this, and what should be the trigger point for them to rethink about their current architecture?
I believe that, like, let me start this way. I think that specifically serverless and Lambda, or what is it called, Azure Functions or Google Cloud Run, there is a threshold. At some point, this is more expensive than running your own instance. That that's a well-known threshold. You can do a pretty simple calculation up front and say, at that number of requests, it's getting more expensive to simply run this with serverless than it is to do it on I don't know, some server that just runs this as a deployed piece of code. That's a simple calculation that you can do.
Okay.
That could be your trigger point to say, hey, you know what? Right now, serverless, we have the knowledge in the team, we're really fast, we can deploy faster, we can really crank out features and stay stable, and everything is nice and beautiful. And when we start approaching that threshold, then let's think about how to migrate between those options.
Okay.
That is, I think, one good thing to do that. Another thing that I personally believe to be true is, when should I refactor? Is, I know in my organization that discussion, at least that discussion by proxy, is happening quite often. Like, oh, we need to have a plan, we need to have an architecture, then it's stable for some time, and then 3 years later we can make the next change because stability above all. But I don't think that it is a choice between good architecture and stability. That's not either or. I think if you start refactoring all the time, you make way smaller changes and you have a way more fluid architecture. That doesn't mean that it's Monday morning and you run on Postgres and have, I don't know, Ruby on Rails and do whatever migration framework they have built into Ruby on Rails. And then on Tuesday, you throw everything away and run for Google's Go and drop all ORM stuff and change from Postgres to MariaDB or whatever. That's not re-architecturing. That's just tearing down the world and rebuilding it. Re-architecturing can be as simple as making a pull request that changes a small part. And if you do that every day, 6 months later, you might have changed the architecture way more than by planning for 3 months what could be your new target architecture and crushing another 3 months with I don't know how many people trying to implement what you thought about initially.
Yeah, but I hear you. But there is another argument from the industry. This kind of refactoring, as you mentioned, as a Prime Video customer, you do not care what they did in background, right? Your application works, you are able to watch video, you're good.
Yeah.
And the same thing happens with other companies. When a tech lead or a solution architect, he goes to business and say, I want to revamp my architecture. The business asks, okay, why? Is there any benefit? No, everything works as usual, but it is a better design and there will be some cost saving. You know what I mean? And
I
then
know what you mean.
they get a pushback. So my point is, and that was one of the inherent question, like what should be the trigger where team can use, what point a team can use to convince business technical debt is not as simple as just doing refactoring, but it is like questioning, do I have a right design? Do I have a right microservices? Do I have the right setup of team? Do I have right distribution of work within my team? And in that sense, would you mind explaining this kind of scenario?
Believe, yeah, I think I know what you mean. But what I what I think is that when I am approaching some business unit with my architecture head, I would just not talk about technology with them.
Mm-hmm.
Why is it interesting to my business unit whether I am doing microservices or monoliths? That is I in my opinion, that's not something that is primarily interesting to them. Of course, I'm happy to have a chat. I'm happy to explain why certain decisions were taken. But when approaching a business unit that needs functionality or that needs cost saving, I think that's a way better argument to have and a way better discussion to have. I mean, you said it yourself in your question. You, as an architect, approach a business unit and you tell them, hey, I want to change my architecture. Why? Because of cost savings. Now, think about the same thing, but approach your business unit in that way and say, hey, you guys, I think I can shave off, I don't know, 6% of your budget. You don't need to spend that money. Do you want to know more?
Yeah. Yeah.
I think that's a
And
very different discussion, and it's just the target audience. If I have that same discussion with a development team, and I approach the development team and tell them, hey, development team, I think your business unit can save 6% of budget,
or 90%.
or 90%, yeah, maybe that's more interesting, but generally I think we have to target the audience. The primary interest, I think, to developers could be, I can take away a lot of pain in how you deploy stuff. I think with that other approach, it might be easier to upgrade. I don't know, several technical choices that we can have or advantages that we can have. Yeah, let's talk to the tech teams this way, but let's talk to the business teams in a different way. And I think that's a core function of an architect, to keep in mind who is my audience right now and how do I convey the message of why should we do this to that audience. That is in my opinion really one of the most important things.
And there is another point to that. The fear of breaking something. Imagine what the kind of architecture redesign Amazon did in it's one of in another startup or some company. That kind of architecture, the first question will be, what if I break something? Of course, something will break if you do not follow the right way of refactoring. But sometimes when people want to refactor something huge, they people you must have seen this kind of meme. If it works, don't touch it, right? So first thing would be like, why do you want to do it? It's working. And the question is, if you break it, how can I make sure when I'm proposing such kind of architecture change, how can I make sure I have some kind of my points where I can say, you know what, I will do this XYZ things so that this migration will be smooth. Or in worst case, if it doesn't pan out, I can roll back. So what would be your advice for someone to be brave, but at the same time be cautious?
Well, of course, never break things easy, right?
Mhm. But it's easier
That's
said
the
than done.
advice, right? That's kind of, just don't break it. No, obviously, I'm kidding. I think we can totally get we could get to a point to make those guarantees, right? If you build a bridge, you can't just build a bridge and tell people, okay, take your trucks, go over that, and if it breaks, we'll just rebuild it. No worries.
Mhm.
The difference is this: we are now with software. That's my opinion. The difference between software and between building those physical things is, in software, it is a lot cheaper to make changes. Most of the time, most of the time, not all the time. It's not only financially cheaper, but also in terms of what effects could it have? Like I told you, I'm in the pharmaceutical industry. We do use a lot of software, and some things are not as easy to change, because if there is a new drug that we make, you definitely want to be sure that it has been tested to the fullest and there are as many guarantees as one can possibly make that it actually works the way it is intended to.
Mhm.
If you take the typical thing where there is no life-threatening condition, where we can live with a certain amount of downtime or outages, making those changes and making smaller changes more often, I think that will help us to progress faster and at higher quality. Making the change from I have a microservice to I will go for a monolith, I don't think that happens overnight. And I don't think it happened overnight with what the team at AWS Prime did. We just see the summary.
Yeah.
I might have missed it, but I'm not seeing how long it took them to do this.
Or when they actually started doing this,
Exactly. So they might have done things like we are running the old version, the microservices version, and in parallel we are already running the new version, and we just see which one works better. That's something that they could have done, and at the end they decided, oh, this now new version works better, we'll just throw away the old thing. They could have done a million different ways. What we see is just the end result describing this is where we started, this is where we ended up. And at the end, there is cost savings. But we don't know how they did it. And I think how you do that stuff, that's more important than we all like to believe. I really think that this initial decisions, like let's do that in a microservices architecture, it's important to take those decisions because you have to agree on something, otherwise you can never start working as a team. Now, if you take that decision, you can move forward. But there is nothing in software, as I said, there are exceptions. There is not a lot of things in software that keep us from changing stuff. I can have my microservices architecture and I can have a team and we run basically 3 microservices maybe. And then all of a sudden we decide actually maybe it should be just 2 or maybe it should be 4. What keeps me from making that change? I'm still using the same pattern that exposes microservices that should be independent of each other and that I can update independently. Whether it's 3 or 2, that's not the important question. But it's really important not to stop. And that brings me back to when I get the question from some business unit of why should we change that and how can I make guarantees? Why should we change it? If you mirror that and tell any person in business, okay, stop moving forward. You will from now on use the same marketing material for the next 5 years. You must not make changes to any of that. Or if you make changes, you have to give me guarantees that it will work. I wouldn't recommend doing that. I've tried it. It is not well perceived. But people will not like that kind of question. And I think when we're fair and we're having that kind of discussion, I can give you those guarantees. It will just be immensely expensive. You just have to run through all the numbers. At the end of the day, it's engineering. We flew to the moon by making engineering work and calculating like all that stuff, and this was less power than an iPhone had. We verified that. It's possible. It's just really, really expensive.
Very well
Why
said.
should I make changes? Because we want to get better. It's not just about, let's say, nerding out and using the cool new framework. It is about things that I can now do faster, or at least I hope to be able to do faster, that I couldn't give you as fast as last week, maybe. Maybe the feature took me 2 weeks to create on average, and I want to make a change. Why? Well, maybe, and that's my hope. When I have, when I'm done with my change, I'm sorry, there's an alarm going off here. When I'm done with my change, maybe I can give you all the features on average in a week instead of 2 weeks. That's why I should make the change.
That's a very good point because actually, a couple of points you did mention. One of them was you have to make a decision to get started, otherwise you can't start. And in many startups or small companies, they take some decision. Sometimes they know there is a right architecture exists, but they cannot do it because the first argument, we have a small team set, we have a budget issue. As soon as we hit this milestone of funding, we will do this one. As soon as our team size reaches 10, we will move from microservice to monolithic or monolith to microservice. So people associated this budget, number of people, again the breakdown of the features and the delivery of feature in terms of time span. you know do you see, is it there are some kind of thumb rule going across the market, like if it is a small team, don't go for microservice because it takes time. Just make sure you have monolithic, and as soon as you have like 15, 20 people, or you can logically separate something, you can define bounded context, then you go to the microservice. For me, I don't think that's the case, but I would be interested to see your thought on that.
I would never say, I want to use an absolute statement. I would never say something like, I'm doing, I'm now not doing microservices, but my goal is to do microservices because that's the better architecture. I
Mhm.
don't think, I'm aware of the parody here, but I don't think that kind of absolute decision making exists. That's why I really am absolutely against following that. Whether you use a microservice or a monolith or something else entirely, I don't think there is a correct and always true technical decision that you can take, especially at the very beginning,
Mhm.
because you just don't know things, right? If that would work, we could all go back to waterfall and make our plan, follow the plan, and it would all work out in the end. That's like saying, why aren't we just doing it correctly the first time? But because it turned out for decades and decades and decades, that's not how it works.
Yeah.
I think following an architectural pattern or an idea for the sake of following it, we shouldn't do that. I think what we should do is look at the problem that we need to solve today
Mhm.
while keeping in mind the problems that we expect. What I mean by that is, if I know that choosing, what would be a good example, right? You there's a ton of databases out there that you can use.
Yeah.
One of them is SQLite.
Mhm.
I know very few people that are saying, oh, my problem today is I need a SQL database. And the easiest choice is SQLite because that's built into almost everything. I don't need a server, it's embedded. That'll be good enough. Most people are not choosing that because they already keep in mind that there might be more than a single user in my product. So let's use something like PostgreSQL, MariaDB, one of the databases that can handle more than a single connection. You might have 0 clients or customers, but you're still thinking of that and keeping that in mind. It's still an easy solution, right? It's very much standard. Choose a standard thing that has proven to work. And when it turns out that you actually become Netflix scale, Google scale, or something else, then it's almost guaranteed that your single database server will not be enough. So you need to make another choice.
Maybe that could be one of the reasons for the Prime Video when they started with the existing architecture, number of videos they had, number of viewer they had, concurrency. It might be the right choice back then. And as soon as they start growing their database, content, and viewer, they had this kind of hard limit of 5% to max out. That 5% is not absolute. They're not telling what is that 5%. Is it like 1,000 of 5%? It is 1 million of
Yes,
5%. So I hear you.
exactly.
Okay. Okay.
Exactly.
That's
It's really hard for us to tell. I truly believe, I fully trust that this team at Amazon made the right decision initially. For a very, very simple reason. It worked.
that, that
If,
that's one that's one of the good point. There might be a solution architect. He designed a system. It was working, and now after 2 years, he is going back to business and says, "You know what? I want to I want to revamp my architecture, and it will save 90%." So there is a fear. Someone will ask him, "Why did you do it like that?" That means you did a bad design back then. Means last 2 years you have been spending 90% more that you could have saved. But this is very important point, like that you mentioned. One has to convey that was not a bad design. It was the right design for that right time, for that right situation.
yes, absolutely. I think if you get that question, when someone truly asks you, why did you design it like that? Looks like it was a bad decision. Maybe there is a different problem in 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 whichever circles you are communicating,
Mhm.
because that decision was taken 2 years ago, and I'm sure, or I really hope, that there is more than one pair of eyes looking at that. So it was something that has been checked back. Maybe a few people talked about it. They all agreed and said, let's do it. Why did we take that decision? Of course, you could be a bit snarky and say, you know what, we already knew it's a bad design, but we all wanted to have job security, so that's why we made a bad design, because we were in for the long game. We knew 2 years later we can redesign and that will make us keep our jobs. That was the reason. Now, speaking out loud, it sounds ridiculous, right?
Yeah.
Who would do that in their right mind? So, back at that point in time, when we had whatever amount of information we had, it was the right decision. Now we have more information, so we change it. Change is, I think, the one thing that everyone should design for. Make things easy to change.
And be brave. So if I have to take something out of this discussion, it's like first have the courage to break things. But when you break, make sure you are breaking it the right way. And what is the right way? Break it small and a regular basis. Be brave,
Yes.
saying that the design was correct or it was working when we did. Okay, there is another point actually I would like to mention. Sometimes it's not you who design system. You joined a team, a company, system is already in place, and now you're looking at the design. There is hardly any documentation why decision has been made, and now you want to say, no, I want to refactor it. And I think it's very common situation, like people joining from one company to another, and then they had this situation, and now
Yeah.
they want to present and they get this pushback. You just joined, you don't know the exact domain, there was a problem statement. So how can one convey this message more effectively in constructive way to bring situation this? current architecture situation to the next correct solution, correct level. I would say, I wouldn't say correct, but better than current one.
So first I would say congratulations, you made a product that basically outlives your average employee tenure.
Mhm.
Congratulations, that's a great product. It's very successful because it's alive longer than your employees usually stay with your team because they might change, or with your company because they might want to move on. A good thing happened to you. Secondly, I think if I would be the architect, completely new, being sent somewhere, the first things that I would do is I don't think it matters where you start. I would maybe approach the business unit and ask them, "Hey, are you happy? What kind of problems should we solve?" Or I would approach the development team or teams and ask the same question. I would try to learn stuff about that. If I have learned some things, then I would try to listen to what those people want. I am very, very, very full of opinions of my own, but in my job, I don't think that my opinions should drive that. I can bring them in. I can absolutely bring them in. And I do that in discussions very, very strongly. But at the end of the day, if I'm not the person writing the code or coming up with the budget, the best thing I can do is bring those teams together and tell them, hey, look, there is a few constraints we need to have. Every organization has constraints, right? Maybe you're saying, hey, we're a Java shop, we only do Java, so that's something you can't change. Or maybe you I don't know, you're saying we wanna go for only AWS as our cloud provider. You can't use Google Cloud. Those are basic decisions. Yes, let's keep to those. But apart from that, there is a business unit that makes money and wants something. And to make money, they need a team. And that team needs, I don't know, help with a few decisions or something to make happen what the business unit needs. It's a circle. It's not like one person or one side can rule over the other. That's just not how it works. Bring them together. Let's have that discussion. Give the power to the development team to make that decision, and I'm sure most of the time development teams can make a good solution design, good architecture, and I'm sure most of the time the business units know what they want, and they pretty much know what they want next. Very important. If they know what you want next, the development team can prepare.
Mm.
Bring those together. There is no need for me to tear down walls. There is no need for me to say, "Oh my God, all your architecture is wrong. You now need to go monolith."
Exactly, like someone from not exactly business, but some enterprise architect or someone, he just reads this article, goes back to his engineering team. Hey guys, what are you doing? Look, Amazon did this. Why can't you do this? Why can't you say? So, you know what I
This
mean?
is
Like,
this is the answer is very simple. I am not Amazon. If if
oh,
if we were if we're saying Amazon did this, why are you not doing this? Then in my company, I would, just by extension of this logic, I would have to say, oh, Amazon is also building a platform for consumer goods. Why are we not doing that? Amazon is also selling books. Why are we not doing that? Oh, actually, Amazon is not creating new drugs. So why are we doing it? We should not do that. Just
yeah,
because someone else does something doesn't mean it's right for me. It's right for them. I can find inspiration. Absolutely. But it doesn't mean it's right for me.
exactly. That's the message. Is very that's very important message because on this LinkedIn and other social media, people are tearing each other like no microservice is better, monolith is better. Look at this, look at that. They're bringing everyone is bringing the use case which he's already convinced himself is a right. As you mentioned, everyone has opinion, And when example they are looking at satisfy that, it's like a proof validation, like I was right, you know.
So to me, the core of this article is this. I would really like to. I know nothing about video processing. I have no clue whether, I don't know, Netflix people will disagree whether that's good or bad or anything. But one thing that I think is really, really good is they improved whatever they had. That's the message to
and
me.
they
That is my core message I took from that.
and they were brave enough to publish it.
Sure.
I mean, as I mentioned, it could have been taken into wrong direction as well, like 90% cost you save, that means your initial design was wrong 90%, you're wasting so much money, right? And that's perception is very important to understand that 90% they are saving is not like, as you mentioned, at that time it was the right decision. At that time, the team
Yes.
made decision, the problem statement they had, the use case they had, it was right decision. And they took the trigger point, like as we have seen in the article, the trigger point for them was they kept monitoring the cost, running cost of the system. It was not like one day they just got like 100K bill, so they had some kind of
Yep.
monitoring. They kept checking, okay, and then they saw, okay, there is some opportunity to improve something here. And the most important point was like they challenged themselves. They didn't just thought some workaround or patch to save money. They challenged the whole architecture. What we did last time, was it correct? And they
It,
challenged it
it
and they redid it.
it just got me thinking. We know that they at least ran for a month. If they ran on Amazon and they have the same internal billing, you get
Mhm.
monthly invoices. So we know the old version existed for more than a month.
Yeah, of course.
We don't know if it was like 2 years, but we know it's more than a month. And if they spent, I mean, of course, it has to be way longer, I guess. But if you really do that and you see, oh my God, it's costing me 100 grand a month, I don't know what number, right? Just making this up. I have got to make this cheaper.
Yeah.
And then in month two, you can actually make a change and you go from 100,000 to 10,000. Why would you think of that as a mistake? Like, apparently, someone said, it's good, let's do it. You spent 100,000 and then you see, it's not good. Let's not do it that way. But these human decision makings, I think it's very hard to find a root cause for that. You can ask, why did it happen? Why didn't no one think of a huge bill in advance? Or how did we miss that whichever property there is? I think in that system it was the step
It-
functions that
yeah,
caused the
calculation.
most
Yeah.
cost. Why didn't no one think of checking this? Or why did no one think of looking at the hard limit of step functions per second or per time unit that you just can call? It might have just been missed, right? And if it was missed, it wasn't missed by a single person. The whole team missed it. The architect, if the architect is not part of the team, missed it. Like, everyone missed it. So you end up with something that's more expensive than expected, that works, and then you start working on it and you make it something that's less expensive. That's great.
That's nice. So yeah, I mean, we can. So I can summarize what I hear from you for any architect, whether it's solution architect or cloud architect, technical, system lead, or simple solution, the software developer, that refactoring is not like 1 month or 2 months or 6 month activity. It's a regular stuff. You have to do it whenever you see something, think, can it be better? So that you don't end up with a big change to be done. Be sure you have your testing sandbox environment so that when you break something, you can fall back, you have something to validate. Architecture decision which was taken in past might be right at that time, but that doesn't mean it's still valid today. So keep challenging it, keep seeing opportunity to improve it.
Yes.
At the same time, you need to have the skill set to talk to the business in a way that you are taking your organization forward, not backward, with this kind of arguments like business doesn't understand technical stuff and they are holding us back, and that's why we have these technical debts. That means you have some challenge in your interpersonal skills. You need to work on that to convey the message. This is not something we are doing it for fancy code somehow, and you can't just stop business from doing their own stuff to make money just to have a best practice. So that's a well balanced one has to have as an architect. And yeah, would you like to summarize something
Uh,
else, a message for our viewer?
Okay, I think that summarizes it pretty well. If in my opinion, the job of an architect is to communicate. Number one, to communicate. Number two, to simplify. And number three, to help make decisions. I think that sums it up pretty well. You have to have the communication skills in a lot of directions. And you have, at the end of the day, you have to help the people to take those decisions. On the business side, they might not be interested in the technology, so you talk to them in a different way about the same topic that is the same outcome. On the developer side, they shouldn't have to get a financial degree. And bringing those two together, yeah, that's communication. That's making it simple enough for either side to understand what the other side wants, and that's helping both to come to some agreement. That's the decision. That's it.
Amazing. Thank you very much, Martin. I really enjoyed our talk. It was so enlightening, to hear it. And again, I understand there is no right decision. There is no wrong decision. We all learn, right? Every problem has their own solution. You just have to keep challenging and learning and moving forward. Thank you for being here. I hope we can see
Anytime.
each other in next videos where we can have some more topics, some cloud or some system design. But thanks again.
It was a pleasure. Anytime.
Thank you. Then
Thank
have
you
a good
so
day.
much.
Bye-bye.
Bye bye.